The morning started like any other aboard the Genesis Prime orbital station, until the sensors picked up something impossible. Captain Lisa Martinez was drinking her coffee and reviewing daily reports when Lieutenant Kevin Barnes burst through the command center doors with eyes wide as dinner plates and hands shaking like autumn leaves. "Captain, you need to see this right now," he said without stopping to catch his breath. "We have incoming ships, and they are not human ships, and they are bigger than anything we have ever built." Lisa set down her coffee mug and moved to the main display screen where green dots appeared against the black background of space, and each dot represented a ship larger than Earth's biggest military vessels. And there were dozens of them approaching from the outer edge of the solar system in perfect formation, like a parade of giants. The communication systems crackled to life with sounds that no human throat could make, and then the translation computers began working, and slowly words formed on the screens in clear English that made Lisa's heart skip several beats. "Greetings to the inhabitants of the third planet from the star you call Sol." The message began, "We are the Zephyrian Confederacy, and we bring an offer of friendship and partnership to your young species." Admiral Jake Thompson arrived at Genesis Prime within 3 hours aboard the fastest shuttle available, and his face showed the same mixture of excitement and worry that everyone felt when faced with the reality that humans were no longer alone in the universe. The alien ships stopped just outside the orbit of Mars and waited there like patient hunters, while more messages arrived every few hours, and each message was polite and friendly, but also carried an undertone that made experienced military officers nervous. High Diplomat Veltar Zenshi introduced himself as the leader of the alien delegation, and his image appeared on screens across the station showing a tall figure with crystalline skin that reflected light like a prism, and eyes that seemed to hold the wisdom of ages, but also the coldness of deep space. "We have watched your species for many years," Veltar explained during the first formal communication. "You show great promise, and we wish to invite you to join our Confederation of Civilized Worlds, where you will enjoy protection and guidance as you take your first steps among the stars." The words sounded wonderful, but Admiral Thompson had spent his entire career learning to read between the lines of diplomatic language, and something about the alien's tone reminded him of a parent speaking to a difficult child who needed to be taught proper behavior. Dr. Amy Rodriguez arrived from Earth with a team of linguists and xenobiologists, and she immediately began studying every word and gesture from the alien communications, while her team worked around the clock to understand the deeper meanings behind the pretty speeches. "Admiral," she said after reviewing hours of recordings, "these beings are not offering us partnership, they are offering us something very different, and we need to understand exactly what that means before we give any kind of answer." The alien fleet remained perfectly still in space, like a collection of sleeping giants, but sensors showed that their ships were scanning everything in the solar system from the smallest asteroid to the largest space station and recording data about human technology and military capabilities. Captain Ryan Blake was millions of kilometers away in the shadow of Jupiter's largest moon, where the most secret project in human history waited in complete darkness and silence while receiving coded updates about the alien arrival through encrypted channels that even the aliens could not detect. The UES Titan's hammer hung in space like a sleeping dragon made of metal and composite armor and fusion reactors that could power entire cities, and weapons that had never been tested except in computer simulations because no target had ever been worthy of their full power. Chief Engineer Sandra Walsh ran final checks on systems that represented 15 years of secret development and the combined efforts of every nation on Earth working together toward a single goal that most people knew nothing about because the truth was too dangerous to share. The Zephyrians continued sending messages filled with descriptions of wonderful technologies, and peaceful cooperation, and the benefits of joining their confederation, where young species could learn from their elders and grow under the protection of more advanced civilizations, President Danny Foster called emergency meetings with world leaders and military commanders while news networks tried to make sense of the greatest story in human history. And people everywhere watched the skies and wondered if this was the beginning of a golden age or something much darker. Admiral Thompson studied intelligence reports about radio signals that Earth's deep space monitoring stations had been collecting for decades, and patterns began emerging that suggested the Zephyrian Confederacy had made similar offers to other species in distant star systems. The signals had always stopped after a few months, and the star systems had gone quiet, and no one had understood what that meant until now, when the same beings were making the same offers to humanity with the same friendly words and patient smiles. "They are giving us 72 hours to consider their generous offer," Admiral Thompson told the Emergency Council, "which sounds reasonable until you realize that 72 hours is not enough time to make the most important decision in human history, unless someone has already decided what our answer should be." The countdown had begun, and somewhere in the darkness between worlds, the greatest weapon humanity had ever created waited for orders while its crew prepared for what might be the last battle that mattered. Dr. Amy Rodriguez worked through her third night without sleep, while her team decoded more alien transmissions and cross-referenced them with decades of deep space monitoring data that had been stored in government archives and forgotten by everyone, except the most dedicated scientists who never stopped listening to the stars. The pattern became clear as morning coffee grew cold on laboratory tables covered with printouts and computer screens showing radio telescope data from 17 different star systems where the signals had followed the same sequence every single time over the past 50 years. "First contact always begins with friendly diplomatic messages," Amy explained to Admiral Thompson during an emergency briefing, followed by cultural exchange programs and offers of technological advancement and membership in their Confederation of Peaceful Worlds. The Admiral studied charts showing signal patterns that repeated across multiple star systems like a script that the aliens followed without deviation, and each system had experienced the same timeline of events before falling silent forever. "The signals always stop after approximately 6 months," Amy continued, "which initially suggested that the civilizations had simply moved beyond radio communication to more advanced technologies. But now we understand they stopped transmitting because there was no one left to operate the transmitters." High Diplomat Veltar requested permission to visit Earth directly, and his crystalline features showed what appeared to be genuine excitement about meeting humanity face to face and experiencing the diversity of cultures on the third planet. From Sol President Foster, granted permission for a limited diplomatic mission, and the alien shuttle descended through Earth's atmosphere like a falling star that controlled its own destiny and landed at the specially prepared facility in neutral territory that had been constructed in just 48 hours, the media. Coverage was unlike anything in human history, as billions of people watched the first alien ambassador step onto Earth's surface and speak words of friendship and cooperation, while government officials smiled for cameras and tried to hide their growing concerns about what this visit really meant. Veltar toured major cities and met with world leaders and spoke at the United Nations about the wonders of galactic civilization and the opportunities that awaited young species who chose to join the Confederation of Advanced Worlds under proper guidance and protection. His words were beautiful and his manner was charming, but intelligence analysts noticed that he always spoke about guidance and protection rather than true partnership, and his descriptions of Confederation membership sounded more like adoption than alliance between equals. Captain Blake received new orders through encrypted quantum channels that could not be intercepted or decoded by alien technology, and the message was simple enough that even a child could understand. but terrifying enough that grown soldiers felt their hands shake while reading it. Maintain complete radio silence and prepare for combat operations. The message stated, "If Earth falls, you are humanity's last hope, and if you receive the activation code, you will know that diplomacy has failed and war has begun." The Titan's hammer drifted in the shadow of Europa like a mechanical whale sleeping in the depths of an ocean made of vacuum and starlight, while 800 crew members performed final system checks and tried not to think about the weight of responsibility on their shoulders. Commander Eric Stone tested weapon systems that drew power from fusion reactors capable of igniting small stars and particle beam arrays that could slice through asteroid belts like knives cutting through warm butter, and railguns that fired projectiles at speeds that made light seem slow. The alien diplomatic mission continued for days while world leaders debated behind closed doors and protesters gathered in major cities, demanding everything from immediate acceptance of alien membership to complete rejection of any foreign influence on human affairs. Dr. Rodriguez discovered more troubling patterns in the historical data when she expanded her analysis to include subtle gravitational anomalies detected by deep space observatories, and what she found made her call Admiral Thompson at 3 in the morning, despite knowing he had not slept in days. "Admiral, we need to talk immediately," she said, "because I have found evidence of what happens to star systems after they accept Confederation membership, and you are not going to like what I have to tell you." The gravitational data showed mass displacement events in systems that had gone silent, and the displacement patterns were consistent with complete planetary destruction and strip mining operations that reduced entire worlds to asteroid fields and scattered debris. They do not conquer worlds, Amy explained during the emergency briefing. They consume them completely and use the raw materials to build more ships for their fleet and support their expanding civilization, while the original inhabitants simply disappear from the universe forever. Admiral Thompson stared at the data displays showing 17 dead star systems and tried to calculate how many billions of beings had been destroyed by the same diplomatic process that was currently happening on Earth with smiling alien ambassadors and promises of peaceful cooperation. The 72-hour deadline approached like an avalanche moving down a mountain, and President Foster prepared to address the world with humanity's final answer, while military commanders made preparations for possibilities that no one wanted to consider but everyone knew might be necessary. High Diplomat Veltar expressed confidence that humanity would make the wise choice and accept Confederation membership because every intelligent species eventually recognized the benefits of joining a larger galactic community under the guidance of more advanced civilizations. His confidence was absolute, and his manner was relaxed because, in thousands of years of expansion, the Zephyrian Confederacy had never encountered a species capable of refusing their generous offer or surviving the consequences of such foolish defiance. But in the darkness between Jupiter and its moons, something waited that the aliens had not detected and could not imagine, because they had never encountered a species that prepared for war while hoping for peace and built weapons of unimaginable power while praying they would never be needed. The countdown continued, and across Earth people watched the skies and wondered if they were witnessing the dawn of a new golden age or the final hours before darkness fell across the human story forever. President Danny Foster stood before the cameras that would broadcast humanity's answer to the galaxy, and his hands remained steady despite knowing that his next words would determine whether the human race survived the next 24 hours or joined 17 other civilizations in eternal silence. The Oval Office had been prepared for this moment with representatives from every major nation standing behind the president, and their faces showed the same mixture of determination and fear that comes when people choose principles over survival and hope their courage will be enough. Citizens of Earth and honored guests from the Zephyrian Confederacy. President Foster began, "We have carefully considered your generous offer of membership in your confederation, and we have reached a unanimous decision that reflects the values and aspirations of our entire species." High Diplomat Veltar watched the broadcast from his ship in orbit, and his crystalline features remained calm because no species had ever possessed the audacity to refuse Confederation membership, and certainly no young civilization would be foolish enough to choose extinction over enlightenment. "The people of Earth respectfully decline your offer." The president continued, "We choose to remain independent and forge our own path among the stars while maintaining peaceful relations with all civilizations that respect our sovereignty and our right to self-determination." The words echoed across space through transmission frequencies that reached every ship in the alien fleet, and for several moments there was complete silence, as if the universe itself had paused to process the unprecedented nature of humanity's response. Admiral Korvash commanded the military wing of the Zephyrian expedition, and his warrior instincts immediately recognized the opportunity that diplomacy had created, because refusal of Confederation membership automatically triggered protocols that had been refined. "Through centuries of conquest, High Diplomat," he said, while studying tactical displays that showed Earth's orbital defenses and military installations, "perhaps a demonstration of our capabilities would help this young species reconsider their hasty decision before they commit themselves to an unfortunate fate." Veltar nodded slowly because the diplomatic phase had concluded according to established procedures, and now military solutions could be implemented without violating any of the complex laws that governed Confederation expansion policies. The alien fleet began moving into attack formation around Earth like wolves circling wounded prey, and their ships powered up weapon systems that could turn continents into glass and oceans into steam, while maintaining the patient demeanor of teachers preparing to deliver an important lesson. Captain Lisa Martinez watched the alien movements from Genesis Prime, and her tactical displays showed energy signatures climbing toward combat levels across 47 enemy vessels, while Earth's defenses prepared for a battle they could not possibly win. "All orbital platforms are reporting ready status," Lieutenant Kevin Barnes announced, "but Admiral, our combined firepower would not scratch the paint on even one of their smaller ships, and they have enough vessels to reduce every city on Earth to rubble in less than an hour." Admiral Thompson acknowledged the report while simultaneously transmitting a coded message toward the outer solar system, where the most classified project in human history waited for orders that would either save civilization or witness its destruction from a safe distance. The message consisted of 3 words that had been chosen months earlier. During planning sessions where military leaders tried to imagine scenarios too terrible to discuss in public, but too important to ignore when preparing for humanity's survival, Release the Kraken traveled through space at light speed toward Jupiter's moons, where Captain Ryan Blake received the transmission and immediately began final preparations for operations that would reveal whether 15 years of secret development had produced a weapon capable of challenging an entire alien fleet. UES Titan's hammer came alive as fusion reactors reached full power, and weapon systems that had never been tested in actual combat began charging with energies that could reshape local space, and artificial intelligence systems calculated firing solutions for targets that had never been encountered before. Chief Engineer Sandra Walsh monitored power levels that exceeded anything achieved in human engineering, while Commander Eric Stone targeted weapons arrays that drew more electricity than entire cities and prepared to fire projectiles that would travel at significant fractions of light speed. "All stations report ready for combat operations," Commander Helen Price announced from the tactical station. "Fusion reactors are at maximum. Safe output and all weapon systems are armed and ready for your orders, Captain." Blake acknowledged the reports while studying sensor data that showed the alien fleet moving into bombardment positions around Earth and calculating approach vectors that would bring the Titan's hammer within weapons range before the enemy could react to its sudden appearance. The Zephyrians transmitted their final ultimatum to Earth with the patience of teachers who had delivered the same lesson countless times to countless species that had made the same foolish choice and suffered the same inevitable consequences. "You have 1 hour to reconsider your decision," Admiral Korvash announced, "after which we will demonstrate the cost of defying the Confederation and help your survivors understand the wisdom of accepting our protection and guidance." The countdown began again, but this time measured in minutes rather than days, and across Earth people gathered in their homes and public places to watch the skies and hold their loved ones close while wondering if they would live to see another sunrise. President Foster remained in the Oval Office with world leaders who had chosen to face whatever came next together rather than hiding, in deep bunkers where they might survive the initial bombardment, but would inherit a world reduced to radioactive ash. The alien weapons continued charging, and Earth's defensive systems prepared for hopeless battle, while in the darkness between worlds something moved that would change the balance of power and prove that humanity had spent 15 years preparing for this exact moment. Captain Blake initiated the jump sequence that would bring the Titan's hammer from the outer solar system to Earth orbit in less than 30 minutes, and his crew prepared to test weapons and defenses against an enemy that had conquered dozens of worlds. The die was cast, and the universe waited to see whether human ingenuity and determination would be enough to face an alien civilization that had never known defeat. The UES Titan's hammer dropped out of hyperspace 3 million kilometers from Earth, and its arrival sent gravity waves rippling through local space like stones thrown into a still pond, while sensor systems across the solar system registered energy signatures that defied conventional understanding of human technology. Captain Ryan Blake stood on the bridge of humanity's greatest achievement and watched as tactical displays showed the alien fleet caught between Earth and something they had never encountered before in centuries of conquest across dozens of star systems. The Zephyrian ships immediately detected the massive energy signature approaching from the outer solar system, but their computers struggled to process readings that suggested impossible power levels and weapons arrays that drew more energy than small stars. "This is Captain Ryan Blake of the United Earth ship Titan's Hammer." His voice carried across all communication frequencies. "Zephyrian vessels you have threatened our world and our people, and I am ordering you to withdraw immediately or face the consequences of your actions." Admiral Korvash studied the tactical displays showing the approaching human vessel and laughed at the audacity of a single ship challenging 47 vessels that had reduced planetary civilizations to cosmic dust and asteroid fields. "One ship against the might of the Confederation fleet," he said to his officers. "These humans clearly do not understand the mathematics of space combat or the futility of resistance against superior firepower and technology." The alien commander ordered 6 heavy cruisers to intercept and destroy the presumptuous human vessel, while the main fleet maintained bombardment positions around Earth and prepared to demonstrate what happened to species that refused Confederation membership. The lead Zephyrian cruiser, ZCS Void Render, accelerated toward the Titan's hammer with weapons charging, and its captain confident that this engagement would last only minutes before the human ship joined the wreckage of countless other vessels that had dared challenge Confederation authority. Commander Eric Stone watched the approaching enemy ships on his tactical display and felt his heart racing as he prepared to test weapons that had been designed in computer simulations but never fired in actual combat against real targets. "Captain, the enemy cruisers are within optimal firing range," he announced. "All weapon systems are charged and ready, and I am awaiting your orders to engage." Blake studied the tactical situation and calculated approach vectors while remembering the years of training and preparation that had led to this moment when humanity would discover whether their greatest gamble had produced a weapon capable of defending Earth. "Target the lead cruiser and fire when ready," he ordered. "Show them what human engineering can accomplish when our survival depends on it." The Void Render opened, Fire first with plasma beams that could glass continents and reduce mountains to vapor, but the energy bolts struck the Titan's hammer's forward shields and scattered like raindrops hitting reinforced steel. The human ship's response was swift and devastating as twin particle beam cannons drew power equivalent to a small star and lanced out across space with focused energy that turned matter into its component atoms. The void render simply ceased to exist as the particle beams struck its hull, and the massive cruiser was vaporized so completely that its debris field consisted of individual molecules scattered across thousands of cubic kilometers of space. The remaining 5 cruisers continued their attack but lasted less than 30 seconds as the Titan's hammer's secondary weapons engaged with railguns firing projectiles at relativistic speeds that punched through alien armor like bullets through paper. Commander Helen Price coordinated the defensive systems while Chief Engineer Sandra Walsh monitored power levels that remained stable despite drawing enough energy to power entire continents during the brief but decisive engagement. The sudden silence that followed the destruction of 6 heavy cruisers echoed across all communication frequencies as both human and alien forces tried to process what they had just witnessed. "That was a demonstration," Captain Blake announced. "Leave our solar system now, or discover what our main guns can do when we stop holding back." High Diplomat Veltar stared at his tactical displays in disbelief, because 6 heavy cruisers had been destroyed in less than 1 minute by a single human vessel, and the implications challenged everything the Confederation understood about. Young Civilization's Admiral Kor Vash felt something he had never experienced during centuries of military service as he watched the debris clouds that had once been his most powerful ships, and realized that the humans possessed technology that exceeded Confederation capabilities. The remaining alien fleet hesitated for the first time in their military history as commanders tried to calculate how a species that had barely achieved interstellar flight could construct a vessel capable of destroying Confederation cruisers with such casual efficiency. Dr. Amy Rodriguez monitored the engagement from Genesis Prime, and her instruments recorded energy readings that confirmed her worst fears about what the aliens would do next, because their doctrine allowed no tolerance for defeat or humiliation, Admiral. "They are going to attack with everything they have," she reported to Thompson. "Their culture cannot accept defeat by an inferior species, and they will sacrifice their entire fleet rather than retreat in dishonor." The Zephyrian fleet began moving into attack formation as Admiral Kor Vash ordered a full assault because 41 ships working together could surely overwhelm even this miraculous human vessel through sheer weight of numbers and concentrated firepower. Captain Blake watched the alien movements and knew that the real battle was about to begin because the demonstration had failed to convince the enemy, and now humanity's survival depended entirely on whether the Titan's hammer could face an entire fleet. "All hands prepare for combat," he announced throughout the ship. "Battle stations, and may whatever gods are watching protect us, because we are about to discover whether 15 years of preparation was enough." The alien fleet charged toward the Titan's hammer like an avalanche of metal and energy, while the human crew prepared to fight the most important battle in the history of their species. Admiral Kor Vash commanded 41 ships against a single human vessel, and his tactical computers calculated that concentrated firepower from the entire fleet would overwhelm any defensive system ever constructed, but something about the approaching battle felt different than the countless victories of his past. The Titan's hammer responded to the alien assault by doing something that no Zephyrian commander had ever witnessed, as the massive human ship began separating into multiple sections that deployed around a central core like a flower opening its petals to face the morning sun. "What are they doing?" demanded Admiral Kor Vash as his sensors struggled to track the modular sections that moved independently while maintaining energy. Connections through invisible force fields that defied Confederation understanding of engineering principles. Captain Blake watched his ship transform into its combat configuration and felt pride in the engineers who had designed a vessel capable of presenting multiple targets while tripling its effective firepower through distributed weapon systems and overlapping defensive fields. Chief Engineer Sandra Walsh monitored the transformation sequence from her station in the central core where the main fusion reactors continued providing power to all sections through quantum entanglement links that made conventional power distribution obsolete. All sections report successful deployment. She announced, "Weapon systems are online and defensive. Shields are at maximum efficiency, and we are ready for whatever they want to throw at us." The Zephyrian fleet opened fire with everything they possessed as plasma beams and particle weapons and kinetic projectiles filled the space around Earth's orbit with enough destructive energy to sterilize entire continents and boil away atmospheric layers. Commander Helen Price coordinated the defensive response as the Titan's hammer's adaptive shielding absorbed and redirected the alien assault. While analyzing the energy patterns and adjusting its defensive frequencies to counter each type of weapon, shields are holding at 90% efficiency. She reported, "Their weapons are powerful, but our defensive systems are adapting faster than they can modify their attack patterns." The human ship's counterattack began with precision strikes that targeted key systems on the alien vessels while avoiding unnecessary destruction because Captain Blake understood that some battles required mercy even in the face of annihilation. Commander Eric Stone fired the main weapon arrays with surgical accuracy that disabled alien ships rather than destroying them completely because the goal was survival, not genocide, and humanity would not become monsters in order to defeat monsters. The Zephyrian formation began breaking apart as ship after ship lost propulsion and weapons and life support, while their crews found themselves drifting helplessly in space with their mighty vessels. Reduced to powerless hulks, Admiral Korvash watched his fleet being systematically disabled by a single human ship and felt something he had never experienced in centuries of conquest as his own flagship lost weapons and engines and communication systems. "How is this possible?" he demanded of his officers. "We have conquered dozens of civilizations and reduced countless worlds to ash, and no single vessel should be capable of defeating an entire Confederation fleet." The battle lasted 18 minutes from first contact to final surrender, and when the shooting stopped, the space around Earth was filled with drifting alien hulks and debris clouds where some ships had chosen destruction rather than capture. High Diplomat Veltar found himself aboard the only Zephyrian vessel that remained fully operational because Captain Blake had deliberately spared the diplomatic ship to serve as a messenger for what would happen next. "Attention surviving Zephyrian vessels," Blake announced across all frequencies. "This engagement is concluded and your military threat has been neutralized, but we take no pleasure in this outcome and offer assistance to any crews requiring life support or medical aid." The human offer of mercy to defeated enemies shocked the alien survivors because Confederation doctrine taught that defeat meant death and conquered species existed only to serve their betters until they were no longer useful. Dr. Amy Rodriguez monitored the aftermath from Genesis Prime and marveled at sensor readings that showed the Titan's hammer reassembling itself into standard configuration while maintaining defensive positions around the disabled alien vessels. "Admiral, the human ship is offering to provide medical assistance and emergency supplies to alien survivors," she reported, which suggests they view this as a defensive action rather than a war of conquest. President Foster addressed the world and the galaxy, simultaneously as news of humanity's victory spread across Earth through communication networks that could barely process the magnitude of what had just occurred. "Today, we proved that the human spirit cannot be conquered by superior technology or overwhelming force," he announced. "We fought not for conquest but for survival, and we offer peace to any civilization that respects our right to exist as free beings." Captain Blake opened a direct communication channel to High Diplomat Veltar, whose crystalline features showed confusion and something that might have been respect for an enemy who had shown mercy after achieving total victory. High Diplomat, you will return to your Confederation and deliver a message that will determine whether this was the first and last battle between our species or merely the opening engagement of a longer conflict. Veltar listened as the human captain explained that Earth possessed 12 additional vessels of the Titan's Hammer class and would use them to defend not only humanity, but any species threatened by Confederation expansion policies. It was a complete fabrication because the Titan's Hammer was humanity's only Colossus-Class Dreadnought, but Veltar had no way of knowing that his entire fleet had been defeated by humanity's singular achievement in military engineering. The defeated diplomatic vessel limped away from Earth's solar system carrying news that would fundamentally alter Confederation expansion policies and force an ancient civilization to reconsider their assumptions about young species and technological development. Admiral Thompson watched the alien retreat and felt relief mixed with apprehension because humanity had won this battle. But the war for survival in a hostile galaxy was just beginning. The Titan's Hammer maintained its position in Earth orbit like a guardian angel made of metal and fusion fire, while its crew processed the reality that they had just changed the balance of power in the galaxy forever. Somewhere in the darkness between stars, other young civilizations received the first reports of a species that had faced Confederation ultimatum and chosen to fight rather than submit and live to tell the story. High Diplomat Veltar arrived at the Confederation capital world of Zephyr Prime 3 weeks after the humiliating defeat at Earth, and his crystalline features showed the strain of carrying news that would shatter centuries of military doctrine and political assumptions about the natural order of galactic civilization. The Great Assembly convened in emergency session as word spread through the Confederation hierarchy that an entire fleet had been defeated by a single vessel from a species that had barely achieved interstellar travel and possessed technology that somehow exceeded the capabilities of the galaxy's most advanced civilization. Supreme Chancellor Kethron listened to Veltar's report with growing disbelief as the diplomat described weapons that turned Confederation cruisers into scattered atoms and defensive systems that adapted to counter every form of attack in the Confederation arsenal. You are telling me that 47 ships, including 6 heavy cruisers, were defeated by one human vessel, the Chancellor said, and that this impossible outcome was achieved through superior technology rather than numerical advantage or tactical surprise. The assembled delegates from dozens of Confederation worlds murmured among themselves as they tried to process the implications of a young species possessing military capabilities that exceeded their own after centuries of technological development and galactic expansion. Military Coordinator Thex Val studied the tactical recordings that Veltar had brought back from Earth, and his analysis confirmed that human technology operated on principles that Confederation science could not explain or duplicate. Their weapon systems draw power levels that should require the resources of an entire star system, he reported, and their defensive shields adapted to our attacks faster than our computers could modify firing patterns, which suggests artificial intelligence capabilities beyond our current understanding. Tucker. Great Assembly erupted in heated debate as some delegates demanded immediate military action to crush this upstart species before they could threaten Confederation supremacy, while others argued for diplomatic contact to understand how humans had achieved such impossible technological advancement. Chancellor Kethron called for order and announced that Confederation policy toward Earth would be suspended pending further investigation into human capabilities and intentions, because attacking a species with unknown weapons technology could result in the destruction of additional fleets. Meanwhile, Captain Ryan Blake and the crew of the Titan's Hammer had become the most famous humans in history as news of their victory spread across Earth through media networks that struggled to convey the magnitude of what had been accomplished. President Foster announced the formation of Earth Defense Command, with Admiral Thompson as its first commander and Captain Blake as head of the new Deep Space Fleet that would protect humanity's expanding presence among the stars. The Titan's hammer underwent extensive analysis as human scientists tried to understand exactly what had made their greatest achievement so devastatingly effective. Against alien technology that had conquered dozens of civilizations, Dr. Amy Rodriguez led the research team that studied battle recordings and discovered that human engineering approaches differed fundamentally from Confederation methods in ways that provided unexpected advantages during combat operations. They built ships like mobile fortresses designed to overwhelm enemies through superior firepower, she explained. But we built the Titan's hammer as an adaptive system capable of analyzing threats and developing countermeasures in real time. The victory at TIFE Earth had consequences that rippled across the galaxy as other species learned that the Confederation could be defeated and began questioning whether submission was their only option when faced with diplomatic ultimatums on the world of Kepler. 7. A reptilian species called the Saurians received Confederation envoys offering the usual terms of protection and membership, but this time the Planetary Council voted to reject the offer and prepare for military resistance. The aquatic cetaceans of Hydros Prime began secret weapons development programs after learning that a young species had successfully defended itself against Confederation expansion and proven that technological innovation could overcome numerical superiority across the galaxy. Dozens of civilizations that had accepted Confederation membership began questioning whether they had chosen wisely or simply surrendered their freedom out of fear of consequences that might not be inevitable. Captain Blake received reports from deep space monitoring stations about increased military activity throughout Confederation space as member worlds began developing their own defensive capabilities and formerly peaceful regions experienced tensions that had not existed for centuries. The human victory had proven that the Confederation was not invincible, but it had also demonstrated that war between galactic civilizations could result in devastation beyond anything previously imagined by species that had lived in peace under Confederation protection. Earth's defensive preparations continued as construction began on additional orbital platforms and weapon systems, while scientists worked to understand the principles that had made the Titan's hammer so effective against superior numbers. Chief Engineer Sandra Walsh led the development program for humanity's second Colossus-Class Dreadnought while trying to improve on the original design based on combat experience and analysis of Confederation technology recovered from disabled ships. "We need to be ready for their return," she told Admiral Thompson, "because they will not make the same mistakes twice, and next time they will bring weapons specifically designed to counter our advantages." Confederation response was already beginning as military researchers analyzed human technology and developed new weapons systems intended to overcome adaptive shielding and modular ship designs. Supreme Chancellor Ketharon authorized the construction of experimental vessels incorporating lessons learned from the Earth defeat while maintaining official policies of peaceful coexistence and diplomatic resolution of conflicts. The galaxy had entered a new era where the balance of power was no longer certain, and young civilizations possessed possibilities that had not existed during the long centuries of Confederation dominance. Captain Blake stood on the bridge of the Titan's hammer and watched Earth turning slowly beneath him while knowing that humanity's greatest challenge was not the battle they had won, but the future they had made possible. 6 months after the battle that changed everything, humanity launched its first exploration fleet beyond the solar system, with the UES Titan's hammer leading 3 smaller vessels toward the nearest star systems that had gone silent during Confederation expansion campaigns. Captain Blake stood on the bridge and watched the stars shift as hyperspace engines carried his fleet toward Alpha Centauri, where radio telescopes had detected faint signals that suggested survivors might still exist on worlds that Confederation records listed as completely pacified. The exploration mission had multiple objectives, including scientific research and diplomatic contact, but everyone understood that its primary purpose was to demonstrate that Earth's victory had not been an accident, and humanity possessed the capability to project force beyond its home system. Commander Helen Price monitored long-range sensors that showed no Confederation activity in the target system, while tactical displays remained, ready to deploy weapons at the first sign of hostile contact because the galaxy had become a much more dangerous place. Dr. Amy Rodriguez accompanied the fleet aboard the research vessel UES Discovery, and her team carried communication equipment designed to establish contact with any surviving civilizations that might welcome human assistance or alliance against Confederation. Expansion. The journey to Alpha Centauri took 3 days through hyperspace, and when the fleet emerged into normal space, they found a system that showed clear signs of recent military action, including debris fields and radiation signatures consistent. With planetary bombardment, Captain, we are detecting artificial structures on the second planet, reported Lieutenant Kevin Barnes. But the energy signatures are minimal, which suggests either low population levels or attempts to avoid detection, Blake ordered the fleet to maintain defensive positions while transmitting friendship messages on multiple frequencies and waiting to see whether any inhabitants would respond to contact from another species that had successfully resisted Confederation demands. The response came 12 hours later as weak radio signals carried messages in mathematical sequences that gradually evolved into attempts at linguistic communication between species that had never encountered each other before. The survivors called themselves the Aurelians, and their messages told a story of desperate resistance against Confederation forces that had demanded submission and received defiance that cost them dearly but preserved their independence at terrible cost. Captain Blake ordered the Discovery to establish close orbit around the Aurelian homeworld while the Titan's hammer maintained patrol positions and monitored for any Confederation activity that might threaten the diplomatic mission. Dr. Rodriguez worked with Aurelian linguists to develop translation protocols and slowly pieced together the story of a civilization that had chosen to fight rather than surrender and paid a price that reduced their population from billions to thousands. They destroyed most of their industrial infrastructure rather than let it fall into Confederation hands, she reported, and they have been hiding in underground cities while slowly rebuilding their technology base. The Aurelians possessed knowledge about Confederation military capabilities and expansion strategies that human intelligence services had been unable to obtain through conventional means, and their information proved invaluable for planning future defensive operations. More importantly, the Aurelians represented proof that other species had chosen resistance over submission and survived the consequences through determination and sacrifice that paralleled humanity's own experience with impossible odds. Captain Blake met with Aurelian leaders through holographic communication systems and proposed an alliance based on mutual defense and shared technology development because both species understood that survival required cooperation between those who valued freedom. The alliance. Negotiations continued for weeks while human engineers studied Aurelian stealth technology and shared information about adaptive shielding and modular ship design that had proven so effective against Confederation vessels. Meanwhile, Earth received reports from deep space monitoring stations about Confederation fleet movements that suggested major military buildups in sectors near human space and preparation for operations that exceeded anything seen during previous expansion campaigns. Admiral Thompson convened emergency planning sessions with world leaders and military commanders as intelligence analysts tried to determine whether the Confederation was preparing for a direct assault on Earth or planning to attack human allies and exploration missions. They are not going to allow our victory to inspire other species to resist their expansion, he warned, and they are certainly not going to permit us to establish alliances with survivors of their previous campaigns. President Foster authorized acceleration of defensive construction projects while diplomatically reaching out to other species that might be willing to join a coalition of free worlds opposed to Confederation expansion policies. The response was encouraging, as representatives from a dozen civilizations expressed interest in cooperative agreements while maintaining careful secrecy about their communications with humanity. To avoid Confederation retaliation, Captain Blake received new orders to expand exploration operations to additional star systems while maintaining readiness for combat operations, because Earth's leadership understood that the window of opportunity for building alliances was rapidly closing. The second human exploration fleet launched toward the Vega system under command of Captain Lisa Martinez aboard the newly constructed UES Defiance, while other vessels began surveying systems that showed signs of recent Confederation activity. Each mission carried the same message of friendship and cooperation between free species, while demonstrating that humanity possessed both the capability and determination to challenge Confederation supremacy wherever it threatened peaceful civilizations. Dr. Rodriguez established the Galactic Freedom Network as a secure communication system linking allied species and providing early warning about Confederation fleet movements while coordinating resistance activities across multiple star systems. The network grew rapidly as more civilizations joined the alliance and shared intelligence about Confederation weaknesses and technological limitations that had been discovered through centuries of reluctant cooperation with their conquerors within. Months, humanity found itself at the center of a growing coalition that challenged the fundamental assumptions underlying Confederation expansion and offered an alternative model based on voluntary cooperation between sovereign species. The galaxy was changing as the long period of Confederation dominance gave way to uncertainty and possibility, while young civilizations discovered that they possessed choices their parents had never imagined. Captain Blake watched the stars from the bridge of the Titan's hammer and knew that humanity had achieved something far more important than military victory because they had given hope to species that had forgotten what freedom meant. The war for galactic freedom was just beginning, but for the first time in centuries, the outcome was not predetermined by superior force and overwhelming numbers. 2 years after first contact, the galaxy had become a very different place as the Galactic Freedom Coalition grew to include 47 independent species, while the Zephyrian Confederacy struggled to maintain control over member worlds that increasingly questioned the benefits of forced membership. Captain Ryan Blake commanded a fleet of 12 human vessels, including 3 new Colossus-Class Dreadnoughts, as Earth's industrial capacity expanded to meet the demands of defending multiple star systems and supporting allied civilizations across hundreds of light-years. The UES Titan's hammer had become a symbol of hope for oppressed species throughout the galaxy while serving as flagship for joint operations that combined human technology with alien expertise in ways that produced capabilities neither could achieve alone. Admiral Thompson reviewed intelligence reports from across Confederation space that showed military units in open rebellion against central authority, while member worlds declared independence and requested protection from coalition forces. The Confederation is collapsing faster than our most optimistic projections suggested, he told President Foster during their weekly briefing, but their core military remains intact, and they still possess the capability to destroy any individual member of our alliance. Supreme Chancellor Kethron faced the greatest crisis in Confederation history as the Great Assembly fractured along species lines and military. Commanders questioned orders that seemed designed to preserve political power rather than ensure galactic stability. The humans had proven that Confederation supremacy was not inevitable, but they had also demonstrated that technological innovation could overcome centuries of established doctrine and organizational structure. Dr. Amy Rodriguez led the Coalition Technology Council that coordinated research and development across member species, while ensuring that no single civilization gained advantages that might threaten the balance of power within the alliance. The breakthrough came when Aurelian stealth technology was combined with human adaptive systems and cetacean quantum computing to produce vessels that could appear anywhere in Confederation space without detection and strike targets with precision that rendered conventional defenses useless. Captain Lisa Martinez commanded the first coalition strike force that interdicted Confederation supply convoys and liberated prison worlds where rebellious populations had been relocated for political re-education and resource extraction. The operations were surgical and precise with minimal casualties on both sides because coalition doctrine emphasized liberation rather than conquest and sought to demonstrate that freedom could be achieved without becoming the monsters they opposed. Each successful mission inspired additional rebellions as Confederation member worlds realized that resistance was possible and support was available from species that had chosen cooperation over domination. The Confederation response was predictably brutal, as loyalist forces attempted to suppress rebellions through increasingly desperate measures that only served to drive more species toward the coalition cause. Captain Blake received emergency orders to intercept a Confederation fleet that was approaching the Kepler system, where the Saurian rebellion had begun and threatened to spread throughout an entire sector if not contained immediately. The Battle of Kepler 7 lasted 6 hours and demonstrated that coalition tactics and technology had evolved far beyond what Confederation forces could counter with conventional weapons and traditional strategies. Commander Eric Stone coordinated the tactical response as coalition vessels used quantum entanglement communication to coordinate attacks that appeared simultaneous across multiple target areas, while adaptive shielding rendered Confederation weapons ineffective. The Confederation fleet broke and retreated after losing 60% of its vessels to forces that seemed to anticipate every move and counter every strategy, with innovations that defied established military doctrine. High Admiral Vex Thor submitted his resignation to Supreme Chancellor Kethron after reviewing battle reports that showed coalition forces had achieved tactical superiority through methods that Confederation military science could not explain or duplicate. "They fight like no enemy we have ever faced," he reported, "because they adapt to our strategies faster than we can develop them, and their technology evolves during combat in ways that our equipment cannot match." The Chancellor authorized secret negotiations with coalition representatives because continuing the conflict would result in the complete destruction of Confederation military power and the collapse of galactic civilization. Captain Blake received the Confederation's surrender aboard the Titan's Hammer in a ceremony that was broadcast across the galaxy as former enemies agreed to transform their relationship from conquest and submission to cooperation and mutual respect. The peace treaty established the Galactic Council as a voluntary association of sovereign species with Earth, serving as neutral ground where disputes could be resolved through negotiation rather than military action. President Foster addressed the galaxy from the United Nations building in New York as representatives from hundreds of civilizations gathered to establish the framework for interstellar cooperation, based on the principles of freedom and self-determination. "Today we begin a new chapter in galactic history," she announced, "where the strength of a civilization will be measured not by its ability to conquer others, but by its willingness to cooperate with those who share our commitment to peace." The Confederation worlds were granted full membership in the Galactic Council with the understanding that their past actions would be forgiven in exchange for their commitment to supporting the rights of all species to choose their own destiny. Dr. Rodriguez established the Galactic University on Luna, where young beings from across the galaxy could study together and develop the relationships that would ensure lasting peace between civilizations that had once viewed each other as threats. Captain Blake was promoted to Admiral of the Coalition Fleet with responsibility for maintaining peace and security throughout Council space, while ensuring that no species would again face the choice between submission and extinction. The Titan's Hammer continued its patrols through the galaxy, but now carried diplomats and scientists rather than weapons of war, as humanity fulfilled its promise to protect the freedom that had been won through courage and sacrifice. Chief Engineer Sandra Walsh designed. The next generation of human vessels with exploration rather than combat as their primary mission, because the galaxy had become a place where curiosity was more valuable than firepower. The age of Confederation dominance had ended, and the era of galactic cooperation had begun, with humanity serving as both guardian and example of what could be achieved when species chose hope over fear. Admiral Blake stood on the bridge of his ship and watched the stars that no longer held threats but instead offered infinite possibilities for discovery and friendship between beings who had learned that diversity was strength rather than weakness. The galaxy had been transformed by a species that refused to surrender their freedom and proved that even the mightiest empire could not stand against the combined will of those who valued independence above safety. The future stretched ahead, filled with challenges and opportunities as hundreds of civilizations worked together to build something greater than any could achieve alone.